Today's learning target is I can write percents as decimals and decimals as percents. When I'm asked to write a percent as a decimal, the first thing I want to do is put it as a fraction. So I would write 7% this way, 7 out of 100, okay, or I'd say 7 hundredths. When I have a fraction as hundredths, I can write it as a decimal, and I can use my place value chart to help me know. So I know 7 hundredths right here. Okay, hundredths is 2 places to the right of our decimal. So to write 7 hundredths, I would need to have a decimal, a 0, 7, just like that, because I would say this, 7 hundredths, because it's in the hundredths place. 2 places to the right of the decimal is hundredths. In this one, 54%, I would do the same thing. Get it as a fraction, that would be 54 hundredths. And I know I would need to go decimal 5, 4 for 54 hundredths. Another way I can look at it when I want to get a percent as a decimal is really what I've done is I've moved the decimal 2 places to the left when I divide by 100. So if I divide by 100, I would move my decimal 2 places to the left, and that would give me 54 hundredths like I had here. In 7, okay, my decimal is always right here when I don't have a decimal. I move it 1 place, it'd be right here, right before it. 2 places. Now, I need a 0 in there as a placeholder because it was it was here, and now it's 1, 2 places over. Now, that helps me if I have something like this, a percent like 82.5%, and I want to put that as a decimal. Okay, well, all I have to do is move my decimal 2 places to the left. 1, 2. So my decimal for this would be 0.825, which when I look up here, I would say it would go decimal 825, would end in the thousandths, 825 thousandths is how I'd say that. Here's a word problem example of that. It says Alaska is the largest state, making up about 16 1/10% of the land area of the U.S. Write this amount as a decimal. So you can see they took the percentage here, 16 1/10%, and they wrote that as a decimal. So they took the 1/10, and that's how you would write 1/10 as a decimal. Okay, so it's 16.1%. Now we want to get rid of the percent, so we're going to divide by 100. So to do that, you move the decimal 2 places to the left, and so we get 161 thousandths as a decimal there. When I'm asked to write a decimal as a percent, there's 2 ways I could do that. Okay, first way I could do that is I could get this into a fraction. Okay, so 4/10 is the way I say that one, and I know that because it's 1 decimal place to the right of the, or 1 place to the right of the decimal is tenths. So 4/10 is written like this, 4/10. Now, remember, when I'm talking about percents, that means per 100. So I would want to get this right here, this denominator, to 100. So how can I do that? Well, I could times this by 10. And if I times the denominator by 10, I have to do the same to the numerator in order to keep it equivalent. So I get 40 1/100ths. Okay, now 40 1/100ths, that I can write as a percent because now I have it as 100, and so it would just be written 40%. The other way I could look at it is if I have 4/10 and I want to write this as a percent. Now when we went the other way, when we went percent to a decimal, we divided by 100. So we moved the decimal 2 places to the left. When we write a decimal to a percent, we multiply by 100. So I can move the decimal 2 places over. So if I do that, it would move over 1 spot here, and then 1 more spot. So I would have my decimal point would be right here, and I'd have to add the 0 there. The decimal is no longer there, so I would get 40%. Let's say I had a fraction like this, okay, 98 hundredths. So I could go 98 over 100, and it's already now in hundredths. So I would go 98%. Or the other way I could do that is I could look and I could say a decimal to a percent, so I'm moving it 1, 2 places over, and it would be then 98%. If I had a decimal like this, 875 thousandths, and I wanted to change it to a percent, I would just look and see, move my decimal 2 places to the right because I'm multiplying by 100. When I multiply by 100, I move 1, 2 places over, and that would give me 87.5 or 87.5%. So the key to remember today is if you're going from decimals to percents, you're going to times it by 100. And if you go percents as decimals, you're going to divide by 100. And remember, when you're timesing it by 100, you're moving it 1, 2 places to the right. And when you're dividing by 100, you're taking the decimal, and here, when I don't see the decimal, it's going to be right here, and going 2 places to the left. So in this top one, if I wanted to do that as a percent, 1, 2 places over there, so the decimal has to move to the end, and I would get 17%. And then here, my decimal would be here. I got to move it 1, 2 places over there, so I get decimal 23 hundredths. Now, here's maybe the way that this might help you remember it. If you think of this one, percents as decimals, decimals divide. The D's are right next to each other. So if that helps you, you can do that. And then the other, so decimals to percents would be multiply. Percents to decimal divide. The D's are right next to each other.